yet.
Good morning, dear friends. It is Thursday, the 7th of August 4th, and we are studying the entire Talmud with Hashem's help, one page, one line at a time. Presently, Masechah Shabbos, chapter 18, page Kuf Chav Tes 129a. Yesterday ended up being a little bit of a detour, although very much in line with our Talmudic discussion. Yesterday, we spoke a little bit about Shabbos out of our regular place. So, for example, if you end up in Whistler or in Senegat, how do you observe Shabbos, or some other far-off places? I'm kidding. So that was yesterday's conversation, and today we're going to go back to the discussion of bloodletting and the different halachis and traditions about that. I do want to just point out before we start, I'd like to dedicate today's learning for the 4th yard site of our Gabbai and Shul, Mr. Petersal, Irving Petersal. His Hebrew name was Yisrael Shlomo ben David, or actually he wouldn't call himself Yisrael Shlomo, it was Yisrael Shlema ben David. And he was a Holocaust survivor, and he was like many Holocaust survivors, but he was special just because he had the privilege to retain his memory and live a relatively long amount of time. But he was really, in a sense, a lifeline, a connection for us to a time past, to a world past. He, until 2018, when he passed, he had almost a perfect recall of events and descriptions of places that he was before the war and during the war and after the war. And he was also, in a sense, a simple man. He never looked for kavod, the spotlight, the high life. He was a simple, hardworking, devoted person. And everyone loves him.
Rabbi, he was unique in another way. He was the only Gabbai who sat down in between calling people up for aliyahs.
Yeah, at the latter years, he would sit.
That's what I remember.
But people would complain sometimes to me that the Gabbai is going so slow. You need a faster Gabbai. I say, listen, you have a chance to get a bracha from a survivor, a yid who's still coming to shul, and you're complaining that it takes an extra minute. I said, cherish the moment, because nothing lasts forever. And we were very privileged to have him, and so I want to dedicate today's learning to him. And personally, I, as a kid, knew many Holocaust survivors and heard many people share their stories. And I must confess, as a young child, you don't appreciate that what you're hearing are priceless and precious memories. And so you didn't always have the sense that you want to preserve those things. It was more like, oh, when's this person going to finish, telling their life story if it was to my father, but of course, those are truly precious memories. But, by the time Mr. Petersal was one of the only people left in shul, we understood how precious and special his stories.
Rabbi, there's two approaches. I wanted to take my father once back, and he got so angry at me. And then other people, the big memory was to take their kids and grandchildren and show them. How can you ask questions?
Everyone is different. But I will tell you, I don't remember if I shared this by the breakfast. I don't know if I said it yesterday on Zoom. I was sitting with him. It was in the last year. He wasn't able to come to shul very often anymore in the last year. And I would visit him. And he starts describing to me the city and the shtetl and the square. And he described how when they first brought in electricity, the town, and he still remembered the novelty and the expression and the way people reacted. But he was describing the town square, and I said, Mr. Pisa, really, are you sure? Is that exactly how it was? And I was just kind of having fun. And he's like 100%. And he was describing to me, if you go here, there was this, and over there. I opened up, his kids had got him a computer. And so I went onto Google Maps, and we found the town, and he knew the cross streets, and we found the town square. And it was almost, a lot of the buildings were different, but we found that the square, and it was just as he described it. And so that's why I personally put a lot of stock in his memory, because in the one instance where we were able to kind of fact check him, he came up doing quite well. So anyways, but his neshama shavna aliyah, he zichro baruch, and so that's that. I want to dedicate today's learning to his memory, and he was a special man, and
a good Galiciana.
a real Galiciano, right? Dr. Hammer, maybe you recall he had some stories on the final in the death march, in the final moments. There was a person that they carried each other on the final, and he described how he propped up his friend and they carried him, and someone else actually wanted to burden him with his coat. I don't know, that he had like all different interesting like conversations that he remembered of that final walk. He also, anyways, many stories. I posted on the Shul WhatsApp group a link to a video or an interview that we had at the Holland's house in the beach club.
Right.
I think you were there, Doctor.
Yes. Not only was I there, I subsequently had a discussion with him where he explained to me that for almost 2 years he was in a labor camp in the town where my parents were from, where most of the family was killed there. But my father got out before as did my mother, and he described just the way you say, because my parents had told me this is what it was mostly Jewish town. This is where the shul was. This is where the schools. He said, I remember. I knew it very, very well. I spent an awful lot of time there. It's out of Krakow, a half hour. Anyway, for me, it was very meaningful because I had my father, unfortunately, passed away. I was in my early 20s and didn't talk about any of that. But so it was kind of interesting to learn all of that information from him. And I loved his Galician accent because I was used to that. From the 180 that I had for some time, and even from my parents when they spoke Yiddish.
And I'll tell you one last thing, even more than that, he very frequently, he wasn't someone who ever wanted to be chazan, or he never wanted to be in the spotlight. He had a real like simple pitos and a humility about him. But if no chazan went up at 9 o'clock, he would look around and he would go up. And so I would say, 4 out of 5 times he was the chazan for Pesukei de Zimra, and he had his davening, and it was precise. It was like a tape recorder. And there are parts of Pesukei de Zimra that till this day, when I say it, I just hear his voice. And even the Galiciana accent is different, of course, than the Chabad or Litvak kind of. But I find myself still sometimes pronouncing some of the words in his way, because even before I really knew how to daven, this was already ingrained in so anyways, Yehi Zichro Baruch. And now I'm going to share the screen and we'll learn a little Gemara. And I just wanted to add, while I find the Gemara, that happens to be today's Tanya begins a segment which is about the value of studying Gemara. So it's a noteworthy. All right, here we go.
The other, just another quick comment, Rabbi, if I may.
Please.
He was in terms of starting davening on time, he also, because of his commitment to his wife, left shul at a certain time.
Yes.
And if the davening went on, he'd fold up his talis, go shake a couple of hands on the way out.
Yes.
And had to be home at a certain time, either to relieve the aide who was there, or his wife expected him at, let's say, 12. He's not going to be there at 10 after 12. So he would leave early on a fairly regular basis in a nice way.
This is true. He was a devoted husband. And I'll say something else. He was very, very independent. So even after his wife passed away, he would not accept. There's so many people that loved him and wanted to help him. He would almost resist any kind of help. He would cook for himself. He would bake for himself. And it was the sweetest thing. And, we do programs. Since COVID, we haven't been able to do it, but we always did different programs in the different condos where we would do different, cultural challah baking or honey cake to provide a Jewish experience for the residents. And he would come and he would be involved. And when we finished, we had leftover baking soda. So he took up his challah he was going to bake. And then he asked my wife in the sweetest way if he could have the baking soda because he's running low. And he bakes, he bakes. And it was like, so it was, another, just a special, he was a Renaissance man of sorts, where he kind of was very handy and did a lot of anything that needed to be done, he did himself. I have to say one more thing. and then we're going to get into the Gemara. Mr. Petersal would share with a chuckle the following story. His wife was in, he would say this, so I'm not trying to be, his wife was even frummer than him, he would say. His wife would not use the elevator on Shabbos. She would only use the stairs. And they had a key. And it came a certain point where they renovated the building and they put new locks and they would not give her the key. And so Mr. Petersal on his own figured out, he did the research and the building said, if you don't like it, sue us. He did the research and pro se, which means on his own, he created whatever the legal documents were to file a lawsuit against the building on his own. And everything was moving along as planned until one day he gets a very disappointing letter in the mail that, dear Mr. Petersal, your case has been dismissed without prejudice. What had happened was, in one of the filings, I guess you have to send every document to all the parties. And at one of the rounds of filing, again, he's doing this, he's not a professional, he's doing this from his home. He failed to send the notice to one of the attorneys or one of the parties. And so because of this technicality, the case was dismissed. But he would say with a chuckle, I got the notice in the mail and I didn't know what it means to be without prejudice. So he reads, the case is dismissed without prejudice. He said, okay, the judge thinks that this is not the building being prejudiced against my wife. So what could I do? Of course, and then he would chuckle. Of course, now he knows that it just means that he messed up on a technicality. But the nice part of the story is 1 week later, the building called him in, said, here's your key. Don't tell anybody. And the so he didn't just bake for himself and he didn't just fix his own electricity. And he wasn't just the guy in the building who they would call when they had problems, but he would even, if he had to sue someone, you figure that out as well. So a special kind of man. All right. Now let's take a look at the Gemara. So as you may recall, the Mishnah is talking about the permissibility to be Mechalel Shabbos any way that you should please. I'm sorry, not you should please. Any way needed to care for a woman in labor. Contrasting that, of course, with restrictions when it comes to care of livestock, but for a human being, Mechalel Shabbos, and anytime a person's life is in jeopardy, we are entirely Doicha Shabbos. And then we discussed for how long one is in the status of being in a sakana and pikuach nefesh. And so we had 3 different time frames, 3 different periods of time, 3 days, 7 days, and 30 days. And the Gemara asked, what was 30 days? And the Gemara said it has to do with going to mikvah. If, because we're afraid of the person, of a woman becoming overly chilled. Remember that in those days, the mikvahs, I don't think were warmed, and they were also outside. Even if there was a degree of privacy, it was outdoors. And so if it was cold and the water was cold, we're talking about a special pikuach nefesh. And so a woman was considered too vulnerable to go to mikvah unless they had means to warm up, as the Gemara discussed. Then the Gemara transitioned from the discussion of being chilled to talk about a chill, a cold that is associated with bloodletting, because bloodletting too was a prevalent common practice. We actually discussed it in the intro before we got this side distracted by a discussion about Mars. Bloodletting was common, and bloodletting needed a person to be warm, and so that's the natural segue from talking about warmth that was needed after after childbirth to needing to be warm after letting blood. Here we go. Oh no. And then we closed off with a series of rabbis of Chachamim. Again, I'm just hitting mute all, but you'll unmute please for all comments and questions. Shmuel had to burn a certain furniture, as did Rabbi Yehuda, as did Rabbah, notwithstanding the appearance of Baal Tashchis, because, as the Rabbah explained, Baal Tashchis de Gufai Odifli, even graver concern than preserving my material assets is preserving my health. And that's indeed the tragic reality, which is when a person is confronted with health conditions, will throw any and all assets and savings to preserve life, because of course a person's well-being is a whole lot more precious and a whole lot more important than any other asset. It should be obvious, but of course it's not so obvious. As a matter of fact, in the prayer of Shema, we say b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol maidecha. B'chol nafshecha means you'll put your life on the line for Hashem. B'chol maidecha, you'll put your money on the line. And Rashi quotes the Gemara that there are some people that Malmain is even more chaviv than their life. Go figure. Anyways, but here it continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, along the lines of bloodletting and how essential it is to keep warm. Le'olam yimkar adam kairais beisai. A person should sell a most integral part of their homes, their house's structure. V'yikach mina olam l'ragla, because as important as it is to have shelter, a person needs to have shoes on their feet. Does this mean the house is going to collapse? I don't think it means the house is going to collapse. I think you might not have a roof over his head. Meaning better not to have a roof over your head, but make sure that you have shoes. Now, hikizdam. A person lets blood. And he doesn't have food to eat. Yimkar min olim shebaraglav. He should even sell his most important asset, his shoes. The yaspik mehen sarchay oichel, so that he'll have food to eat. Let's read Rashi. Laikach min olim. She'ein l'chay bizoy min amahalach yachar pashuk. There's no greater cultural shame than to walk around public outside. I suppose the ultimate description, the ultimate definition of poverty is a person that walks around without shoes. So although shoes are so important, one should even sell the material that's providing roof over their head. When it comes to after having their bloodlet, eating is absolutely essential. And again, as we know today, if you do a blood donation, which I guess in a sense your body has the same experience that you're short on blood, there always make sure that you drink juice and eat foods to replenish and to help your body begin to regenerate, I guess, blood, but also to have koyach, because when you let blood, a person can become weak.
Rabbi,
yes.
When I was working, we had a large Black community there, and they still practice that bloodletting theory that when they get sick, it's a bug that's in their system, and they let out the blood. They cut themselves to let out the blood, to let the demons and the insects that are causing this, or the virus that's causing their sickness.
So would they ask you to help them let blood, or they would ask you to help them?
No, I wouldn't do that. They know how to do that, but they asked me what to do to replenish it. So I says, you can't replenish blood. You can drink, and your body will replenish it. But they had a hard time understanding that.
All right.
Rabbi, I have a very different question. Why are we discussing this kind of stuff? What are we supposed to learn? That first you have to eat even before you buy shoes. You don't eat, you die.
Well, here we're talking that a person, I guess, is not at the point of starvation, except that because they're short on blood, because they've let their blood, they do need to replenish.
What is this coming to teach us? I'm trying to figure out.
This is teaching the Talmudic values of how to deal with. You're saying today that you don't let blood?
No, it's just saying, make sure you have shoes on your feet so you don't step on the ground, on a rock, or cut your feet. I mean, I need them to come to tell me that.
I think this is a societal standard.
I'm sorry to go there, but it's like it's so below the level of what we should be concerned about.
The Talmud is not beyond describing or giving or teaching values to the people of the Talmud era. So really, I think what your question would be, what would be the analogy, or what would be the is this Gemara immediately relevant today, at a time where we don't let blood? So first of all,
no, I would be prepared to entertain. Do the people have to be told, even in Talmudic times, and make sure you don't starve? Make sure you have shoes?
No, this does not have to do with starvation. Listen to what Alan said. This is advice about how to recover after you've lost blood. Now you're saying, go to Alan, don't learn the Gemara. But in the time of the Gemara, part of Jewish values is health and wellness, to the point where the Talmud is absolutely comfortable teaching us a halacha about how a person needs to care for themselves. And don't be silly.
They could also tell you don't take too much blood because you'll bleed to death. I need to be
Well,
told
let's
that.
keep on learning. Let's see if the Gemara says that. So the Gemara first asks, what are tzarchei suda? My tzarchei suda. Rav Amar Basar. Rav says it's meat. Shmuel Amar Yayin. Shmuel says wine. Rav Amar Basar. Why does Rav say it's meat? Nafsha chalaf nafsha. A person has lost some of their koyach, some of their blood, literally some of their soul. But it doesn't mean that you lost some of your soul, but you lost some of your koyach. So eat something that's muscle, that's koyach. That was an animal koyach. Shmuel Amar Yayin, sumka chalaf sumka. There's something similar about the redness of wine and the redness of blood. Now here's where Rabbi will say this does not reflect contemporary modern medicine, but I believe we don't have the tools to do this, but there are deeper truths in this conversation, but we could bookmark it for another time. Simon, now the Gemara continues, and we're going to talk about the practices of different sages of the Gemara in regards to how they would handle bloodletting. And we give a mnemonic, shenim sar. Shenim sar is a mnemonic of the people who we're about to talk about. We're going to talk about Shmuel, Yochanan, Nachman, Yosef, and Rava. Now you're going to ask me why or how is it possible that we'll use a siman, a mnemonic, that doesn't use the first letter of the word. Well, it's possible that certain, well, I don't know, that's how they chose to do it. Probably because they wanted to find a cutesy word that will help us remember, or maybe the first letter or two, which are very common, are less helpful than the more unique letter. Oh, here. Shin for Shmuel, Nun for Yochanan, Mem for Nachman, Samach for Yosef, and Reish for Rav. Shmuel, let's talk about Shmuel and how he would handle his post-blood-letting rituals. Shmuel, David Milsa, the day that he did that thing, Rashi, that caused a bloodletting, Avdilei Tavshila Ditchale. He would make a dish with tchol, with cooked spleen, says Rabbi Steinsaltz Rashi, tchol sumka chola sumka, because the tchol, the spleen, has a red blood-like color, which was understood to be helpful in replenishing blood. Shmuel was a doctor, so maybe he had anecdotal evidence that this seemed to help. Maybe they associated the help to the color of the spleen. I don't know. Rav Yochanan, Shasei Adinafik, Tia Me'une. Rav Yochanan would drink so much blood until the tihi, Rashi says, the reyach, the scent, would come out of his ears. He would have the stench of wine. Meaning that, I guess, was a lot of wine. Rav Yosef, Shasi ad the nafik, mirivda de kuslisa. Rav Yosef would drink until the area that was the area where they punctured to let the blood out would have a wine scent. I think that's what it's saying.
Rabbi, it may not cure anything, but it would make him feel better.
Just this is a Gemara. We just need to listen.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Hold on. Let's finish, then you'll ask the question.
Okay.
Rav Nachman, Shasi Adekopet Chole. I'm sorry. Rav Yochanan would drink till the smell would come from his ears. Rav Nachman would drink until his spleen was, so to speak, floating in wine. Does it mean literally? Probably not. It means he was very full of wine, I believe. Rav Yosef Shasi Adekopet Chole. Rav Yosef would drink until wine, so to speak, would spurt from his incision, the place where the bloodletting was. Rava mehadar achamra bartlosa tarfi, and Rava would be particular to drink wine that was 3 years old Let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz. 3 leaves that were 3 years old. That's not how Rashi explains it, but I'm trying to figure out. Ben Gimel Shanim, a 3-year-old Shatana Imay Mishanikla Gimel Olin Chadashim. Anyways, a precise type of wine. The bottom line is all of these sages had different rituals, and as you may notice, there was a lot of wine. Now get ready for the last one, which is going to also be very interesting. Amar lahu Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Rabbanan. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak would tell the sages who were under his, in his academy, B'matusa minaychu, I beg, please. B'yayma dehakaza, the day that you're going to have your bloodlet, Amru libisaychu, tell your households, Nachman ikva legaban. Prepare a meal as if the great Rav Nachman, the Rosh Yeshiva, is coming. Rashi, harbu b'seuda ki'ilu ani soyedatz lechem. Have a meal as if the most prestigious. Prepare a feast as if the president is coming. Make sure you have a very serious meal. Rashi explains not that you should lie to your household and tell them that Rav Nachman is coming, but say imagine Rav Nachman is coming. I could envision others translating this in a more literal sense. Say the Rosh Yeshiva is coming, so it'll be a big feast, and then when you come home by yourself. But I think we could comfortably embrace Rashi's interpretation. Yes, Doctor, you're muted. You're saying something, Dr. Hammer. If you're saying something, you're muted. All right. Again, Doctor, if you're saying, we didn't hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Doctor. No, now you're muted again. Hit unmute.
Okay.
Go ahead. Now we hear you.
The last thing you said is should make a meal as though the president's coming. So could we infer that in those days the Jews agreed who the president was legitimately? End of discussion. But you infer this from the pshat.
You can infer from my comment that I
got it.
What?
I'm waiting for my question.
Okay, I'm now the knock is Atkan. Ellie, go ahead.
Wait, let me ask my question. Okay, so
Go
my
ahead,
question is, Baruch Hashem, we have doctors in the house, and we're saying blood letting. Is that what we're saying? So how can someone know if they're drinking an A positive, O positive, B positive, which is bad for their body?
Okay, we
How do they know
can't
what they're
really
drinking?
ask medical questions based on the scientific knowledge of a time past. In a
Yeah, but
time
you're
past,
asking, they do bloodletting to cure their bodies. Maybe they're hurting their bodies by taking the wrong blood.
they weren't getting infusions of blood. They were just letting blood out, and their body was replenishing blood.
It's a good question.
Rabbi, the meal before makes a lot of sense.
Right?
That'll help you recover as much as the meal
Exactly.
after.
They weren't total medicine of times past. They weren't total bozos. They were very smart. They probably were better at observing the superficial effect of certain practices. They just didn't know a lot of the intricacies of the human body, and certainly they didn't know about micro.
I just had a terrific idea. The guy wants a good meal. He tells the wife, I think I'm going for bloodletting tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. All righty. There's a
Enjoy
lot of
Somebody's making noise. I can't hear you.
there's a lot of
Crinkling.
All right. Let's read some more. Kulu Yarome Asiri. Let's read Rabbi Steinsaltz. All types of hold on. Let's get our resources here. One second.
What's she saying?
Oh, are you ready for this? Okay. This is good. Listen carefully. Well, not good, but whatever. We'll have fun with this. Kulu Yaroma Asiri. One is never allowed to use trickery. It's unethical to use trickery, deception. Deception is an un-Jewish, ungodly value. Bar mehai arma dishari, with the exception of a specific deception, which is okay. What's the deception? Manda avid milsa v'le efshale. A person who has his blood let and he does not have ample funds to buy wine. You know what you should do? Lishkol zuza mehacha. Take a worn down coin. Rashi, zuz ra. So you have coins that after many, many years in circulation begin to fade. Now, the fading doesn't just mean that you cannot see the symbol on the coin, but it also means that a certain amount of the precious metal has worn down. Or as we know in times past, the reason why coins today, many of them have ridges at the end, is that people would sand off the edges. And if you sand off every coin a bit, you have enough dust to make a coin. So he's saying, take a coin that's been rubbed out. That's already not ideal. Other commentaries say it's not out of circulation, but it's an ideal coin. Go as a shopper to a wine store. Rashi. How does it work? You're trying to sell wine. It's like the ice cream shops today. They give you a little, you want to know which flavor to get, they'll give you a little sample. So the wine stores would also give a little sample. To make sure that it's good quality. The yitoim, and he should taste it and say, okay, I'll buy some. When he presents the coin, the chenvani realizes it's worn down. It's an ideal coin. And he says, I would rather a different coin. And the guy says, I'm sorry, it's the only coin I have. Basically, the Gemara here is saying, and I have a problem with this, and I'm sure you have a problem with this, that if you need wine, you can deploy trickery to receive a sample, presenting yourself as if you are a sincere purchaser, even though ultimately it is not your intention to buy the wine.
Rabbi,
hold on. Until you have a revius of wine, which is the amount of wine that is needed. The Eloi, if he does not have this coin, so he cannot deploy this deception, Leichol Shavtamri Uchmasa, he should eat 7 black dates, the Leishav Mishcha B'tzidei, and he should rub oil on his temple, Vinigre B'shimsha, and sleep in the sun. Rashi, one second. Then he'll be warmed by the figs and by the oil and by the dates and the oil and the sun heat. Go ahead.
Rabbi, I see this from the other side as a former retailer, that one should not do that, waste the merchant's time and try and trick a merchant. Only this, which is a great artifice, sufficient enough to be mentioned, the practice.
Yes. Basically, we're saying you should not be deceptive. Now, I'm challenged by this Gemara too. I must be honest. Why don't you just go in and say, listen, it's an emergency. Can you give me a sample?
No, it's a question. People going into stores, no intention to buy.
I'll tell you what, I was taught, and I believe this is a Jewish value, not to go into a store if you don't intend to buy something.
Right.
And if you go into a store, to at least buy something nominal to honor the ownership. Now, I know that's not always true, because part of the American mall culture is window shopping, and they understand that many people browse. The hope is that even though you don't think you're going to buy, you'll fall in love with a product and you'll buy it anyway. So it's not etched in stone, but I think if you're going to walk into a privately owned corner market where they're struggling to survive, I think that principle would apply. And
the Torah explicitly prohibits asking about the price of the item if you don't have an intention to buy this item.
Yeah, it's considered. So I don't know if it's not biblical. I don't believe, but it's called Genevas Das. deception. You're deceiving the person and making them think that you intend to make the purchase when you really don't. You're getting the person's hopes up, and it's an emotional, a person that struggles and every sale is make it or break it, and what they bring home at the end of the day is, it's terribly cruel to lead them on, make them think they have a buyer, and then take their time, and maybe there are other customers that they're going to neglect, thinking that you're a good customer. And so, yes, generally speaking, one must
Rabbi,
yes.
to bring it up to date, a rabbi told me Beis Din had a case of somebody who was fired or fined from work because they were on their computer on their own, and they poskened about stealing time.
Yeah, but that's different. That's about a worker being committed to the work, and not to
stealing of the time.
Yeah.
Well, here in the mountains, a year ago, 2 years ago, Walmart stopped accepting after the summer returns of air conditioners because
in
certain
Jewish
groups,
areas, right?
and because certain groups would come up for the summer to the bungalows, go get an air conditioner and return it 60 days later. So they stopped accepting it.
Which is a very embarrassing thing. Not.
And of
You
course,
want to have a lot of air conditioners. I have.
And of course, we
I
have
have a lot
to
of air
remember the
conditioners.
story
We don't take returns.
of Isaac's blessing, that Yaakov stealing it.
But that's a different story there.
That's a different story, but that's a deception.
A deception, yes. Yes. But I think, as Rebberal says, I think, as Rebberal said, where we found an instance of deception, that's okay, but this is the exception that should prove the rule, which is it is not acceptable to engage in deception. Oh, Rabbi Applebaum just showed me that it's a mission. It's not in the Chumash, but there is an explicit mission that describes that Ainah would be to inquire about a product which you don't actually intend to buy. Rabbi Applebaum, yeah. So it's an explicit Mishnah in Bava Metzia, Perek Daled Mishnah Yud. And so thank you, Professor. That's what you were referencing in a Yeshua Rabbi Applebaum.
But actually, here the situation is even worse. It's not a question of Nevas Das. This is actually is Neva Mamish, because you're taking an actual some of the wine and not paying for it.
So I'll explain to you why, according to the Mefarshim, it's not absolute Geneva. Well, first of all, the cost of business is that you give samples. That is a standard. But if you don't intend to buy, maybe the sample is only for a legitimate buyer. So all the Mefarshim explain that if you have a coin that's not ideal, you're willing to buy the wine. The problem is all you have is this bad coin. The coin is not out of circulation. And so if the shopkeeper is willing to sell you the wine, you'll have the wine you need. If they are unwilling to accept it, then you could engage in this practice, because ultimately this coin would work. But you understand that the odds of the person accepting it are low, and therefore it's only under this urgent, dire circumstance.
This is not a situation of a free sample.
Yes, it is.
You see from the description that those samples you were expected to pay a minimal amount, a zuz, and it was premeditated. Basically, you're giving instructions of how to bypass paying. I mean, if he accepts it, yeah, okay, but even then you need more. But
No. The sample is free. The presumption is that if you like the wine, you're going to buy a zuz worth, which was a flask or whatever.
Rabbi, it could be even worse. The merchant takes the zuz, the guy gets the wine, and then the merchant finds out the coin is no good.
No. Again, the Goyis Yavitz, and everyone points out, this is a coin that works. It's not out of currency. It's not decommissioned. Coins wear down slowly. So in the lifespan of a coin, it might lose, I don't know, a fraction of an ounce.
No, I understand that, but the merchant in a rush might presume it's a good one.
That's not what the
Whatever-
Gemara is proposing here. That is not. The Gemara knows any good salesman in those days, where coins were a little less standardized and there was more room for shtick, they would weigh
Rabbi,
the coin.
think of current currency that's, not real, that counterfeit, and
Exactly.
people get away with it
No.
even today.
But any store owner, you'll notice, any worker has been trained to inspect the $100 bill to make sure that it's legit. So the assumption here is not that you're going to pull one over. That's not what the Gemara is suggesting. The Gemara is simply suggesting you have a coin which is likely the shopkeeper is not going to like, but you could still use it to leverage a sample because of the urgency of the wine. All right, let's move on. As I told you, that's what it is. What time is it? Oh, you have some time. All right. Now we're going to read about a favorite. We've already encountered him in Masechah Shabbos before. This is a Gentile Chacham who was friendly or encountered Shmuel, and we've met him previously. And let's see about the conversation that's going to happen now. Avlate or Avlat, Ashkeche the Shmuel the Gani b'Shimsha. Avlat found Shmuel lying in the sun. He was sunbathing. Amarlei, Avlat tells him, Chachima the Yehudai Bisham Abatava, wise Jew, Chacham of the Jewish people. Is something that's dangerous, that's toxic, suddenly become good for you? Rashi, Adam. The sun, which is bad for humanity, has it become good for you? So this is an instance, I think. Well, I mean, sun, I think today in science we use a mixed bag, because on one hand you have vitamin D, which is good for you. On the other hand, the being in the sun can also be damaging for the skin, right? So, but in time of the Gemara, it's clear that folks knew that the Gemara was not that the folks of the Gemara knew that sun was not good for you. Amarlei. So Shmuel answers, Yoima de Hakazahu. No, today is a day where I need to be in the sun because it's a day of bloodletting, and therefore, he needed the care. He needed the sun therapy. The Gemara continues and says, V'loihi. That was not the truth of the matter. There actually is a certain day that the rays of the sun are therapeutic. And that is Yoima de Naflabe Tkufas Tammuz, the day that begins the summer solstice, the Tammuz solstice. The Savar, but Shmuel figured, Loi, at Galilee, he's not going to reveal this important secret. Why not? I don't know. I guess he don't want to reveal it. Probably because it was too much of a conversation. It would have taken too much of a conversation.
How do we jive this with leap years?
I'm sorry.
How do we jive it with a leap year when the longest day might not be exactly?
Why a leap year? The longest day, the summer solstice, has nothing to do with the Jewish calendar. It has to do with the solar calendar.
No, but if you go by Tammuz, that day of Tammuz and the
No. It's the name for the summer solstice. It doesn't have a specific name. Day of Tammuz.
Oh,
Tammuz
okay.
is the hottest. Tammuz is peak summer.
Okay.
Tupas Tammuz. Well, let's look really fast.
We don't want to go back to yesterday.
What was yesterday? What was wrong with yesterday?
Solstice, the sun, the planets.
Listen. All right, let's see the Ben Yoda, the Ben Ishchai comments our Gemara. Nearly Levad Pshat Advarim. In addition to the literal take on the story, Remez Loi Bazer Remez, they were also speaking a coded conversation. As you may recall, in the past, we've had conversations between a Jewish sage and a Gentile, or something of the like. And the Ben Yoyada, the Ben Ish Chai, likes to show how there was a literal conversation, but there is also a coded conversation that's happening behind the scenes. Ramaz Misada Klipa Shmedaberes Begroina Beroisa Yosha Beshemesh Shuav Oyevais. The Klipa who was being expressed by this Gentile sees a Jew in the sun, which is good for him. So he says that according to the Zohar, Shemesh is the mazel of Yaakov and the moon is the mazel of Esav. And so what happens is nowadays, Hashem swapped. The moon is the symbol for Yaakov, which the moon waxes and wanes, and the sun appears to belong to Esav in this world. So in truth, the fortune of the sun belongs to Yaakov, and the story of the moon belongs to Esav. But in this world, in Gullus, it's reversed. Therefore, and therefore the Gentiles, the Goyim, in a Jewish experience of Gullus, seem to have a lot more good than the Jews do. And this is what he's saying. Jewish scholar, the sun was something that we took from you, which is Bisha, now it's Esav's. Mihavatava, did you get it back? Did you get back your fortune? Are you reclaiming the sun? And so Shmuel responds, this whole world is a world of bloodletting. What's bloodletting? You got to take out a little blood. Symbolically, he was saying we are gleaning the good sparks out of evil. And that's why I'm in the sun, because I'm schlepping sparks of good, latent good, Kedusha that's within this world. And the way this happens is because Esav gets to have the party, and we get to draw out the holy energy. Okay, we could probably tie this down, but I just wanted to give a flavor of how he explains it, and so we'll stop here. All right, now we have another siman, Hekel Beruach Tamasha, which we'll see what it means literally, but translated, or not literally, we'll see what it means, but translated literally, indifference and wind, taste, weighted. Beruach Tamasha. Rabu Shmuel, Dami Tarvayu. So we have Rab and Shmuel who both comment as follows. Kol HaMekel. Besudas HaKazas Dam. If a person doesn't take the meal following bloodletting seriously, it impacts the meal, the sustenance from heaven. The Imrim, and from Shemayim they say, so to speak, Hu al chayav leichas. He is careless about his own life. Ani achas alav. I should care about him. This is reminiscent of a saying that's probably not from the Jewish Bible, that God helps those who help themselves. But this is a take on that idea. If you're not going to intervene, if you're not going to mind your own well-being, you expect Hashem to intervene. And basically, we're saying that a person should do the steps that are necessary to preserve and to optimize their well-being. Rabbi Shmuel Damitar Vayu, similarly, Rabbi Shmuel also said as follows: Haiman David Milsa, a person who lets blood, like they say, don't sit in the space where the wind is blowing. Dilma Shafile Umana, maybe he'll lose too much blood. We'll make him lay Arvise. And all that will be left is a revius. The Asi Zika B'Shaif Mine, and the wind will literally draw more blood. The Asi Lidei Sakan, and then the person's life will be in jeopardy. Let's read Rashi to see what it means. Heicha Dekarach Zika. In Drun. Don't sit in a place where there are many windows and the wind blows through. Dilma Shafei Leomana. Mireka Midamek Mayashefei Lachavera. Will empty him out of blood. He only will allow the person to have literally the most nominal amount of blood that a human being could survive. The Hainu Revius, which was understood to be a Revius of blood. And then the wind will cause his blood to be further diminished. I don't think we mean that that wind makes your blood leave your body. Probably what it means is that the cold causes it to contract and become less volume, which was their way of understanding how wind could have a negative interaction with a person who had blood let. Let me look in the Steinsaltz Gemara, see if he has any explanation here.
While you're looking, the Yiddish expression, Hitziche der Gott hitten.
Again.
Hitziche der Gott hitten.
What? I don't understand that.
Which
If you
is?
take care of yourself, then God will help you.
Hit zich.
Yeah.
Okay, if you take care of yourself, yeah. Okay, Rabbi Steinsaltz does not explain why we think how the wind would diminish hang on one more second. All right, let's see the next story, and then we'll call it a day. Shmuel have a ragil. The Ovid Milsa Bebesa. The Shav Libanya Varicha. He would draw blood in a house. The Shav Livni Va'archa, 7 bricks and a half brick. Yoima Chada Avad. One day he did bloodletting, Ve'argish Benafshe, and he felt really, really miserable. Bodak V'chaser Chadarcha, and he noticed that a little thickness of the wall was missing. Rashi. He was in a bunker type home with a very thick wall. And it was missing a little bit. So basically, a little bit of the insulation was missing, and it already impacted his well-being, because you need to be in a very warm, insulated area to be experiencing during bloodletting. Rabu Shmuel Dami Tarvai, another teaching of Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel many times argue, but they can both agree. Haiman David Milsa, a person who lets their blood being let, Litoim Midi, eat something first, Vahadar Leifak, and then you can go outside. The Eloi Toim Midi, if you don't eat anything, Ipaga Bishchava. If you encounter Steinsaltz says your corpse, Yarki Ape, his face will turn green. Ipaga Bimandikot Anafshe, and if he encounters a murderer, Moyis will die. Ipaga B'davar Acher, and if he encounters a pig, Kashal Davar Acher, he'll get something else that's called a Davar Acher, which is leprosy. Basically, it's a very bad idea. It's spiritually and physically toxic to not eat before going out into a hazardous, dangerous world where you encounter all different kinds of strange medical and supernatural forces that can impact your well-being. This concludes today's discussion about bloodletting. Tomorrow we'll continue the Ezer Hashem. Once again, we dedicated today's learning to Yisrael Shlomo ben David, Mr. Peter Sal, Shabbas Ch. Thank you all so much for joining once again, giving me a chance even after yesterday's discussion. And if you're interested in watching the recording of Mr. Peter Sal's interview, I posted it on the Shul WhatsApp group, And I also uploaded the video to YouTube to make sure that it's preserved, even if Facebook, you never know what could happen. This way it's preserved on 2 platforms. I posted both links. And the main thing is we should have good news for Klal Yisrael. And thank you all so
Amen.
much for joining today. Yeah, I hope to see everyone tomorrow.
Rabbi,
Yes,
did you happen to see that the article I sent you yesterday? But
I
the
did
water?
not. If I have a moment, I'll take a look today. I did not notice.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
All right, have a good day, guys.
Okay, have a great day.
Rosh Hashanah,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.